Before we begin, let's breathe together. Inhale deeply and exhale completely. Let the body find its place, stretched out on a bed, seated in quiet reflection, or wrapped in warmth. So often mornings begin with rushing, alarms, lists, memories of yesterday. But the Buddha taught that the first breath of the day holds a hidden peace. The mind is soft, the heart still open, and the world has not yet asked anything of us. These stories are like morning light. They don't instruct, they simply reveal what was always there. If you'd like, share what time it is where you are listening, or what feeling you carry into this moment. It's a way of saying, I am here, awake and alive. Let your breath slow, and let that soft awareness expand. Let us step gently into the first story. A novice had a restless mind. He tried to sit, tried to breathe, tried to still the thoughts, but each time he closed his eyes, his mind swirled. Lists, regrets, what ifs, what nexts. He couldn't find peace, and the more he tried to force stillness, the louder everything seemed to become. One morning, after failing again to meditate, he stood up in frustration. I'm broken, he muttered, and he walked, head down, steps fast, until he nearly collided with the old groundskeeper, Master Rio. Rio was known for his silence. He didn't teach. He didn't lecture. He just tended the gardens and cleaned the gutters. But he had been at the temple longer than anyone. The novice bowed clumsily. Forgive me, Master. Rio tilted his head, studying him. You're not breathing like a monk, he said. The novice looked up, startled. Rio turned, motioning for him to follow. They walked in silence through the bamboo grove to the kitchen courtyard, where a wide clay bowl stood filled with clear water. Sit, Rio said. The novice sat. Rio picked up a small stick, and without a word, he stirred the water, gently at first, then faster, until the surface churned and the reflection broke into chaos. The novice watched. Then Rio set the stick down. They sat in silence. The bowl shimmered, then slowed, then stilled. The novice could suddenly see his own face again in the reflection. Rio looked at him and asked, Did I make the water still? The novice blinked. Number it settled by itself. Rio nodded. So will your mind. And he walked away. This is the story of trusting the stillness beneath disturbance. Commentary. Many people believe meditation is about forcing silence, forcing peace, erasing all thought. But in truth, it is about letting the water settle. Your mind is like a bowl of clear water. Every thought, every worry, every fear is like a stick stirring it. The more you react, the more you stir. The more you chase silence, the more turbulence you create. But if you sit and breathe and wait without judgment, the water begins to settle on its own. This is the natural wisdom of the mind. You don't need to fix it. You need to allow it. There's a Zen saying, muddy water clears itself if left alone. The novice learned something that day, not from a sutra, not from a formal teaching, but from water. He stopped fighting his thoughts. Instead, he watched them. Like leaves drifting across a pond. He stopped demanding they leave, and instead bowed as they passed. And slowly, something began to shift. Not instantly, but gently, like the bowl that stopped churning the moment no hand stirred it. This is how peace comes. Not by control, not by perfection, but by patience, by the quiet knowing that nothing stirred stays stirred forever. If you are anxious, sit like the bowl. If you are overwhelmed, breathe like the wind that forgets itself. If you are angry, wait like the pond after rain. It will pass, all of it. And when it does, clarity returns. You'll see your reflection again. Not because you forced it, but because you didn't run. So next time you feel lost in thought, don't fix, don't flee, just wait. And let the water be water. There was once a long road that passed through deserts, cliffs, and shadowed valleys. Many travelers set out on it, seeking peace, safety, or home. But the road was hard. Sun beat down like flame. Rocks cut the soles of their feet. Wind stole their breath and sand filled their eyes. They grew tired, weary, ready to turn back. Some sat by the wayside, too exhausted to move. Others began to whisper, perhaps the road is endless. Perhaps we were fools to begin. Perhaps this path leads nowhere. And then they saw it. Up ahead, a city. Walls shining, gates wide, flags fluttering in breeze. A place of refuge, a place to rest. Hope stirred again. They stood, ran, cheered. Inside there were cool fountains, fresh food, gentle beds. They were safe, at last. But when they awoke the next morning, the city was gone. No walls, no gates, no fountains, only the long road ahead. And a single voice from the air. This city was an illusion, a resting place created to help you continue. Now rise and go on. This is the parable of the illusion city from the Lotus Sutra. It is a story about skillful means, the power of compassionate illusion used to awaken real strength. The city was not a lie. It was a gift, a temporary truth, a form of mercy shaped to meet exhausted minds. The Buddha is the one who created the city, not because he needed it, but because we did. Because the path is long, and sometimes we need to believe we've arrived before we can realize we haven't. In the parable, the travelers are like us. We start spiritual practice with high hopes. We read, we meditate, we strive, but somewhere along the way, we get tired. The progress feels slow. The suffering still returns. We wonder, is this working? Am I really changing? And then, suddenly, we have an insight, a moment of peace. A breakthrough. It feels like we've reached something final. We name it, we hold it, we build a city around it. But the next day, it's gone. And that's when the Buddha's voice speaks. That peace was real, but it was not the end. You rested. Now continue. The illusion city is not deception. It is timing. It is compassion shaped like form. It is a way of saying, this isn't the end, but it's enough for now. Imagine a parent on a long hike with a child. The child tires and cries. So the parent says, just a little farther, there's a surprise ahead. And when they reach a clearing, the child sees a snack, a blanket, a resting place. Later, the child learns there's still more to walk, but they are stronger now. because the kindness made them believe again. That is the illusion city, a fiction that leads to truth, a rest that becomes fuel, a stop that is not a trap. In the West, we're taught to distrust illusions, to strip away comfort, to seek truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But Mahayana Buddhism teaches that skillful means are also sacred, that sometimes what we need is more important than what is absolute. There's a saying, only a fool tells a drowning man, there is no water. A wise teacher offers a hand, even if it's through illusion, even if it's temporary. Because awakening does not demand perfection, it demands presence. It demands we continue. There's another layer to the story. The travelers who believed in the city, they were not punished. They were grateful, because that illusion saved them. And when it disappeared, they did not despair. They trusted the voice. They stood up and walked again. Commentary. We all have illusion cities, moments of insight we think will last forever, people we thought would never leave, practices we swore would fix everything. Then life shifts, and the walls disappear. We panic, but the Buddha whispers, keep going. The path doesn't end at comfort. It passes through it and beyond it. Because what we're looking for is not safety. It's liberation, not a stopping place, but the end of stopping altogether. But here's the paradox. Without the illusion city, we might never find the strength to walk again. And that's why it's not a mistake. It's a skillful gift. One Zen teacher put it this way: enlightenment is real, but the first one you find is not the last. Celebrate it, thank it, then let it go. Even the Dharma itself is a raft. Even the Buddha himself once said, if my words help you, use them. If they do not, leave them behind. The illusion city teaches us not to cling, not even to the things that save us. Because truth moves, and we must move with it. One traveler asked the Buddha, how will I know I've reached the end? And the Buddha smiled. When there is no more need to ask. Until then, let the cities come and go. Let the rests be real, even if they're brief. And when they vanish, bow to them, thank them. Then stand up and walk again. The full moon rose slowly over the temple pond. Its pale light spilled across the stone paths, kissed the tips of bamboo leaves, and finally rested on the water surface. Perfect, round, and still. A quiet hush fell over the garden. Even the crickets seemed to pause. It was as if the world had stopped breathing, just long enough to notice the moon. But what the monks gathered around the pond saw was not the real moon. It was only a reflection. A novice named Kaoru sat cross-legged near the water's edge. She had come to meditate, but found herself staring at the luminous circle. It shimmered with every ripple. It danced when the breeze blew. It fractured into 1,000 pieces when a frog leapt across. And yet, when the pond stilled again, there it was, whole, unmoved, unaffected. The head monk, Master Renji, approached quietly. He sat beside her without a word. For a while they both watched. Finally, Kaoru whispered, "It looks so real." Renji nodded. "It does." She tilted her head. "But it's not. It's just light. Renji smiled. Is your reflection in the mirror not you? Kaoru hesitated. I don't know. It looks like me, but it's not me. Then what is it? He asked. A copy, she guessed. Renji turned to her. And what is your idea of yourself? She blinked. A reflection. Renji picked up a small stone. He held it above the pond, then let it fall. Plop. The moon shattered again. 1,000 tiny moons danced outward on the ripples. Does the moon mind? He asked. Kaoru laughed softly. No. Does the moon change? No, she said again. Renji looked at her gently. Then let your mind be the sky, not the water. The moon is always whole, whether you see it clearly or not. That night, Kaoru wrote in her journal, I chase shadows. I polish reflections. I mistake the moon in the water for the truth. The next morning, during temple chores, Kaoru knocked over a bowl. It shattered. Clay and rice spilled across the floor. She gasped. But instead of panic, she remembered the moon. A fellow novice scolded her. She bowed, cleaned the mess. Inside, she felt no shame. Only the quiet smile of someone who had seen a truth. Weeks later, a guest philosopher visited the temple. He asked the monks, what is real? Some spoke of emptiness, others of causes and conditions. One offered the Heart Sutra. But when the question came to Kaoru, she said, the moon and the water. She explained, the moon is reality. The water is our mind. When our mind is still, reality reflects clearly. When disturbed, the image breaks, but not the truth. The philosopher nodded slowly. That is poetic, but how do you know it's true? Kaoru looked up. Because when I stop chasing the reflection, I feel the light on my face. That night, Master Renji shared a final koan with the gathered monks. A monk asked, Master, what is enlightenment? The master pointed to the moon in the sky. Then he pointed to the moon in the water. Then he smiled. No answer, no explanation, just two moons. And the silence between them. There is a saying in Zen, do not mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon itself. And so the teachings end where they began, with a reflection, a still pond, a moon that never moved, and a student who finally stopped looking for herself in the ripples. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. The boy stood barefoot in the dust. Beyond the village, where the rice paddies gave way to forest, he searched. The sun hung low, casting long shadows through the bamboo groves. A wind stirred the leaves, but he did not move. His eyes scanned the ground for tracks, for broken twigs, for any sign of the ox. He had lost it, or perhaps he had never truly found it. And so began the journey, not of chasing, but of remembering. In Zen tradition, the ox herding pictures are a series of 10 images, each one a moment in the path toward awakening, not literal, not linear, but true in the way that poetry is true. They begin with a search. A boy looking for an ox. But the ox is not made of flesh. It is the self, the mind, the original nature. The Buddha within, hidden beneath thought, lost in distraction, masked by craving. And the boy, he is all of us. First, searching for the ox, the boy leaves the village. He's tired of ordinary life. He's heard rumors of peace, of awakening, of something real beneath the noise. So he begins to search. He reads sutras, he listens to teachers, he sits in meditation. But his mind is full of fog. Thoughts crowd his vision. Doubt clings like vines. Still, he continues, because something inside him knows there is more than this. 2. Seeing the traces. One morning, while gathering wood, he sees a bent stalk, then a hoof print in the mud. His heart jumps. Maybe I'm close. He kneels, follows the signs. In his practice, he notices moments of stillness. A breath that feels vast, a silence that doesn't feel empty. Just hints, traces, but enough to give him hope. 3. Catching sight of the ox. Suddenly, there it is, a glimpse through the trees, a flash of black hide, a tail flick. The boy freezes, joy rises, and fear. Because now it's real, not just a concept, not just a goal. The ox exists, but it is wild. It does not come when called, and when the boy steps closer, it bolts. 4th, catching the ox. He runs, he sweats, he stumbles. At last, he grabs the rope. The ox bucks, throws its weight against him. It drags him through the grass, but he holds tight. This is the phase of discipline, of hard practice, of struggling with the mind that wants to flee. It takes effort, structure, ritual. Again and again he pulls the ox back, until finally it yields. Not because it is broken, but because it begins to trust. 5. Taming the ox. Now he walks beside it, still holding the rope but not fighting. He brushes its coat, feeds it grain. They sit together beneath a tree. This is calm abiding. Meditation deepens. The mind, once unruly, now rests beside him like a friend. Joy rises, not from excitement, but from peace. 6. Riding the ox home. The boy climbs on its back. He plays the flute as they travel. There's laughter now. The ox no longer resists. They are one motion, one rhythm. The self and the selfless walking home together. Some think this is the end, but it is not. There is more, always more. 7. The ox transcended. One morning, he wakes, and the ox is gone. Not lost, gone, dissolved. Because there was never a separate ox, only the illusion of separation. There is no one taming another, no duality, only being, only suchness. The boy sits in silence, and everything is enough. 8. Both ox and self forgotten. Now, not even the boy remains. No watcher, no watched. Just sky, wind, movement without mover, compassion without identity, peace without object. This is awakening. Not a peak to climb, but a dissolving of the climber. 9. Returning to the source. But even this is not the end. He returns to the world, to the place he left behind. The village, the noise, the errands. He no longer seeks to escape it. Because the sacred is here too, in the washing of bowls, in the crying of babies, in the marketplace and the broom. 10th, entering the marketplace with open hands. He walks through the village, dirty feet, laughing eyes, no halo, no robe, just a man carrying firewood and smiling at children. He does not preach, does not speak of truth. He simply helps, lends a hand, bows to beggars, listens without interrupting, because he carries nothing and gives everything. Commentary: the ox herding. Pictures are not a ladder, they are a mirror. We move forward, then fall back, then forward again. Sometimes we glimpse the ox for a moment, then lose it for years. And that's okay, because the journey is not about getting somewhere. It's about seeing clearly where we are. The boy is not special. He is not a saint. He is you. Waking up slowly, letting go gently, returning home freely, and realizing it was never the ox that was missing, only the one who thought it was separate. She never meant harm. She only passed on what she heard. A whispered comment here, a raised eyebrow there, a half-finished sentence passed along like a secret prayer. Her name was Sister Nima, young, lively, kind mostly, but her words moved quickly and quietly unraveled the thread of trust inside the temple. At first, it was small. She meditates longer when people are watching. They say the head cook isn't really vegetarian. I heard the abbot used to be married. No malice, just conversation, just sharing. But soon, monks began to turn away from each other in the corridor. Silent meals grew tenser. Chanting lost its rhythm. Smiles stiffened at the edges. No one named the cause, but it lingered, like smoke with no fire. One afternoon, the abbot asked Sister Nima to join him in the garden. The plum trees were beginning to blossom, delicate petals stirring in the breeze. He held a small bag in his hand. "Walk with me," he said gently. They walked in silence down the path that circled the temple grounds. After a while, he opened the bag and began to scatter chicken feathers along the way. Sister Nima tilted her head. "Why are you doing that?" The abbot didn't answer. When they returned to the garden, he handed her the empty bag. "Now," he said, "go and collect them all." She blinked. "But the wind's taken them. They're scattered everywhere." He looked at her and said softly, "So too with your words." That night she wept. This is the story of speech and consequence, of how sound can build or destroy. Commentary. In Buddhist practice, right speech is one of the Eightfold Path's pillars. It sounds simple, but it is one of the hardest, because words don't vanish when we stop speaking. They ripple, they stain, they take root in someone else's mind, sometimes forever. Sister Nima did not speak with cruelty, but neither did she speak with care. And in that space, in the absence of intention, harm took hold. We often forget how powerful language is. A word can lift someone from despair or push them over the edge. It can invite reflection or ignite shame. Words are not just air. They are actions. They build worlds. There's a Zen saying, "Speak only if it improves upon the silence." Sister Nima filled silence with curiosity, suspicion, drama, and the silence grew quieter, but colder, until no one trusted what they didn't hear. The Buddha once said, A person is not wise because they speak much. A person is wise when they speak what is true and what causes no harm. That is the gate of right speech. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it fails even one, it's better to let it drift away like a feather on the wind. After that night, Sister Nima changed. She stopped repeating what others said. She listened more, spoke less. When she did speak, her words came slowly, like water poured from a clean bowl. The monks began to look at her differently, not because she had become wise overnight, but because she was watching herself now, watching what she left behind in others when she spoke. And over time, trust returned to the temple. Not because of a sermon, not because of a rule, but because one person saw the feathers scatter and chose to stop scattering more. So speak with care. Speak like you're building something with your breath. Because you are. Every sentence is a seed, and whether it blooms or bruises is up to you. There was once a monastery nestled in the cliffs above a wide, mist-covered valley. Travelers came from all over the land, seeking wisdom from the old abbot who lived at its heart. But no one ever entered without first passing through the gate of questions. It was a tall wooden door, weathered by time, bound in iron, and it never seemed to open, no matter how many times pilgrims knocked. Instead, beside the gate stood a young monk with a calm face and a single instruction. If you wish to pass, you must answer, what keeps you from entering? Some said, my sins. Others said, I'm not ready. One said, I'm too angry. Another said, I'm still seeking. To each answer, the monk bowed and said, return when you are not. And so the pilgrims would leave, some frustrated, some weeping, some silent. One day, a weathered traveler approached. She was older than most. Her robes were plain, her eyes clear. She stood before the gate and read the words carved above, liberation is here. Then she looked at the gate and realized there was no lock, no bolt, no bar, just a handle. She turned it. The door opened and she walked through. The monk beside the gate only smiled, because the lesson had never been in the answer, it had been in the assumption. This is the story of liberation, not as something earned, but as something already available, once illusion falls away. Commentary. Most of us believe the door is locked, that we must be perfect first, clean first, worthy first, empty of anger or sadness or self-doubt. But the Dharma does not wait for your perfection, it waits for your presence. The Buddha did not say, you must transcend before you begin. He said, see clearly, and in seeing, freedom unfolds. The gate of questions was never locked, but the mind said it was, because it clings to a self-image that believes, I am not there yet. I am not enough. I am still broken. But brokenness too is part of the path, and sometimes it is the crack that lets the light through. Liberation is not far. It is not elsewhere. It is not earned. It is the moment you stop demanding anything of the moment and simply turn the handle. The traveler who opened the gate was not special. She had simply grown tired of pretending the barrier was real. She saw the door for what it was, just a door, and walked forward. The monks say the abbot greeted her without words, only a bow, because no celebration is needed for one who sees the obvious. This story is often told to new students when they first enter training. Some smile, some frown, but a few immediately stand up and walk to the edge of the room to check if the door is locked. And when it opens easily, you can always hear the soft laughter of awakening. So if you find yourself waiting for permission, waiting for a sign, waiting to be good enough to begin, ask, what if the door was never locked? What if I only needed to reach for it? And if your hand trembles, that's all right. Just turn the handle. The Dharma is not waiting behind it. The Dharma is the act of reaching. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. A house stood at the edge of a quiet village. It wasn't grand. Its roof sagged a little. Its floorboards creaked, but the door was always open, and those who passed by often entered. One day, a traveler knocked. His shoulders were tight with worry, his breath short. He clutched his bag like it held every mistake he'd ever made. The host opened the door and smiled. "Come in," she said gently. "No judgment here, just tea and a place to rest." The next morning, the traveler left, but soon another came, this time angry. Fists clenched, jaw locked. The host welcomed him too, showed him to a chair by the fire, listened to him shout, cry, fall silent, then gave him warm bread without asking why he was so upset. They kept coming. Joy danced through the garden one spring afternoon, barefoot and laughing. Grief followed days later, slow, grey, soaking wet from a sudden storm. Loneliness showed up in the middle of the night, shivering. Hope arrived unexpectedly, glowing faintly. Fear sometimes knocked twice in one day. Still, the host opened the door every time. One evening, a boy from the village asked, "Why'd you let them all in, even the scary ones?" The host looked at the boy and said, "Because this house is a guest house, and all emotions are guests. They arrive, they stay, they leave. None of them are me." This story comes from an old Sufi poem by Rumi, beloved also in Buddhist circles. It teaches what meditation often reveals. You are not your emotions. You are the one who notices them, who makes space, who lets them pass through. Anger is not wrong. It is a guest, sometimes loud, sometimes dangerous. But it comes bearing messages, and if you slam the door in its face, it breaks in through the window. Sadness is not weakness. It is a guest. It may rearrange the furniture for a while. It may lie on the couch for days. But eventually, it moves on, especially if you sit beside it instead of pretending it isn't there. Joy too is a guest. And though it's tempting to cling to joy and beg it to stay, even joy must leave. That's okay. You can welcome it again tomorrow. The problem is not the emotions. The suffering comes when we believe they are permanent, when we build whole identities around them. I am anxious. I am unlovable. I am angry. But you are not those things. You are the house. They are just visitors. There's a story of a monk who struggled with anxiety. He tried to push it away, ignore it, meditate it into silence. Nothing worked. Until one day, his teacher said, "Stop fighting the visitor. Invite it in, serve it tea, ask it why it came. The next time anxiety returned, the monk didn't resist. He noticed his breath tightening, his chest constricting. And he whispered, "Welcome, you're here again." He didn't like it, but he didn't hate it either. He watched it, listened to it, sat with it, and slowly it softened, and eventually it left. This is what it means to live as a guest house, to offer your presence, your kindness, your non-attachment to whatever arises. It does not mean you let the guests destroy the house. It means you don't mistake them for permanent residents. You set boundaries, but not walls. You show compassion, not control. You practice presence, not possession. Sometimes guests arrive unannounced. Sometimes they slam the door. Sometimes they cry in the middle of the night. That's okay. You breathe. You listen. You stay grounded in the structure of the house. The breath, the body, the awareness that is always home. Commentary. The guest house reminds us of the temporary nature of all emotions. Nothing stays forever, no matter how intense. And by opening the door instead of guarding it with fear or shame, we reclaim something powerful. Agency, because when you welcome a feeling, you stop being its prisoner. To be the host is not to be passive. It is to be strong, grounded, compassionate enough to say, "This too belongs, but it will not stay forever, and it is not who I am." You are not broken for feeling grief. You are not failing because fear has returned. You are not weak for missing someone. You are alive, and the guest house of aliveness is open to all visitors, even the ones that make us uncomfortable. When you practice this kind of welcoming, something beautiful happens. You stop judging others for their emotions too. You recognize their guests. You become safer, more compassionate, more real, because you've sat with your own visitors, and you know what it means to offer space. So tonight, when something arrives, a pang in your chest, a wave of sadness, a flicker of joy, pause, breathe, and ask gently, "What do you need? You're welcome here. For now." Then let it pass, let it teach you, let it leave, and return to silence. At the corner of Maple and Fifth, there stood a little cafe that never advertised. No neon signs, no digital menus, just a chalkboard easel that read, "Come in, breathe, sip slowly." Inside, the scent of cinnamon and ground espresso lingered like an old song. And behind the counter moved Raya. She didn't move quickly, not because she was lazy, but because every motion mattered. Scoop, steam, pour, wipe. A rhythm of care, repeated hundreds of times a day. Customers noticed. They came stressed, hurried, multitasking, but left quieter. Because somehow, even in the rush of morning lines, Raya made you feel like time had paused. She wore no uniform, only soft linen aprons and a tiny brass bell around her wrist. It didn't jingle constantly, just gently when she turned or wiped the counter or placed a mug just right. A small sound, but intentional. One day, a man asked her, "What's the bell for? Aesthetic?" Raya smiled. "It's a reminder," she said, "to return to the moment." The bell had come from a monastery in Korea, a gift from a traveling monk who had passed through one rainy morning, soaked to the bone, but smiling like the clouds had kissed him. He'd ordered chamomile tea, sat for an hour, said nothing, and when he left, he gave her the bell. "For your practice," he had whispered. At first, she didn't know what he meant. But over time, she came to understand. Every chime was a callback. Back to the steam rising from the milk. Back to the texture of ceramic under her fingertips. Back to the presence of the person in front of her. One regular, a nurse named Ellie, used to joke, "You're the only person who can make caffeine feel calming." Raya just laughed, but she knew why. It wasn't the coffee, it was the attention. The Buddha once said, "When walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit. Above all, don't wobble." Raya lived that. In a world addicted to wobbling. One afternoon, a man burst in, frantic. His phone had died. He was late for a pitch. He spilled his order twice in his rush. But Raya didn't scold. She simply placed the cup on the counter slowly. Her bell chimed. He paused, looked up. And in that pause, he breathed. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. Presence doesn't need hours. It needs moments, noticed fully. Years passed. The cafe stayed small, never franchised, never changed hands, but its walls soaked in thousands of quiet returns. One morning, Raya didn't show up. A handwritten sign appeared. "Back in 3 days, practicing stillness." Customers waited, and when she returned, they smiled. Because somehow, her absence had reminded them. Even a barista needs to refill the cup. The bell still chimed, still soft, still enough. A sound that said, "You're here, be here." They worked for 7 days without rest, 4 monks, bent over low tables, hands steady, breath slow. Grain by grain, they placed colored sand onto a wide wooden platform, creating a mandala of breathtaking beauty. Circles inside circles, lotus petals, Buddhas seated in calm symmetry, tiny bridges crossing into sacred realms. It was more than art. It was a world. And they built it, knowing it would not last. Villagers came to watch. Children gasped. Old men wept. Even travelers paused on their way to market, drawn in by the silence, the precision, the colors blooming under careful fingers. Each night, the monks covered the mandala with a cloth. Each morning, they returned to their posture, like time itself had been paused. Not one grain out of place, not one breath wasted. On the 8th day, the abbot arrived. He walked around the mandala in silence, once, twice. Then he bowed and said only 4 words, "It is time now." One of the monks picked up a long white feather. He reached toward the center of the mandala and drew a single line through it. The design fractured instantly. A second stroke, then a third. The patterns dissolved. The colors blurred. What had taken a week to build unraveled in minutes, like a dream returning to mist. Some gasped, others cried, but the monks only bowed, then gathered the sand in a simple clay bowl. They walked together to the river. With a small prayer, they tipped the bowl, and the sand returned to water, color to flow, form to formlessness. Gone. This is the story of letting go, of beauty not owned, of effort not clung to. of creation not possessed. Commentary. The sand mandala is one of the clearest teachings in Mahayana Buddhism, not because of how it looks, but because of what happens after. In the West, we celebrate permanence. We build to last. We frame art. We publish books. We try to leave a legacy. But in Buddhism, there is no permanence, only appearance, only change, only flow. The monks poured their hearts into the mandala, their care, their breath, their presence. They built it not despite its impermanence, but because of it. They knew it would vanish, and they still gave everything. That is love without grasping, effort without ego, joy without needing to possess. The act of destroying the mandala is not cruelty, it is compassion, a reminder. Everything we cling to will one day dissolve. Beauty, youth, achievement, even memory. We can either mourn this endlessly or bow to it. There is a phrase in the Diamond Sutra. All conditioned things are like a dream, a phantom, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. Thus we shall view them. It doesn't mean nothing matters. It means everything matters more deeply when you know it's passing. You love your child's laughter more when you know they won't be 5 forever. You savor tea more when it's the last cup from the pot. You forgive faster when you realize tomorrow isn't promised. One woman who watched the mandala's destruction approached the abbot in tears. "All that work," she said, "and now it's gone." The abbot bowed. "That is why it was precious," he replied. When we cling, we suffer. When we release, we flow. This doesn't mean becoming detached or cold. It means seeing clearly and trusting what passes. Trusting that even after the mandala is gone, the hands that built it are still steady. The breath that guided it is still with you. The river still carries the colors. Life is not meant to be grasped. It is meant to be given. Again and again. Like sand to a current. So build your mandalas. Love your people. Paint your days with color. But don't try to trap the moment. Let it come. Let it shine. And when it's time, let it go. And perhaps, like the monks at the river, smile while you do. With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. Long ago, in the shadow of the Mahabharata range, there lived a young man named Jorin. He was clever, quick-witted, strong of voice and proud of heart. But Jorin carried something deeper, an anger that lived just beneath his skin, not always cruel, but sharp, like a wind that turned cold without warning. One day, after an argument with his father, Jorin stormed out of their stone cottage and began climbing the mountain trail above their village. "I don't need anyone," he shouted at the trees. But the forest only rustled in reply. He climbed higher until the air turned thin and the path narrowed to rock and dust. At the highest ridge, he stopped and yelled into the vastness below. "I hate you!" The words bounced off stone, and to his surprise, the mountain answered, "I hate you! I hate you!" The echo rang out across the cliffs, his own voice thrown back at him. Jorin blinked. He had never heard the mountain speak before. Curious, he cupped his hands again. "You're a fool!" The echo answered, "You're a fool, a fool!" Now he laughed nervously. Then, hesitantly, he tried, "I love you." And again the valley responded, "I love you. Love you." His voice returned, but changed by the silence it passed through. Jorin stood there for a long time, the cold wind tugging at his sleeves, the vastness of the world pressing in. And then he turned back down the path, but quieter than before. This is the story of karma, of how what we send out returns. Commentary. In Sanskrit, karma means action, but not just physical action. Also thought, speech, intention. Each one plants a seed. And those seeds, over time, bear fruit, not as punishment, not as reward, but as response. Like an echo. The mountain did not decide to insult Jorin. It simply returned what was given. This is the truth of karma. The world is not judging you. It is reflecting you. The Buddha once said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness follows you, like a shadow that never leaves. Most people think karma is about fate, but it's not. Karma is not what happens to you. It's how you move, and what that movement shapes in return. Jorin didn't change overnight, but that moment on the mountain stayed with him. He began to notice the way his words shaped the people around him, how a harsh joke left someone smaller, how a small kindness lifted a room. He didn't always get it right, but now he listened for the echo. One day, years later, Jorin stood at the base of the same mountain. His son, angry about a broken toy, was shouting at the sky. Jorin placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Careful, little one. The mountain hears." The boy looked up, puzzled, and Jorin smiled. "Speak gently, even when no one answers right away. Because life is an echo. Sometimes it comes back loud, sometimes soft, sometimes years later, sometimes not until your children feel it. But it always returns. So what will you shout into the valley? What kind of world will your words shape? Be mindful of your echoes, because one day you'll hear them again. There was once a wealthy man who lived in a great house. The house was vast, with many rooms, winding corridors, tall beams and ancient wood. But it was old and dry, and one day it caught fire. Smoke slipped beneath the doors, flames curled along the rafters, the walls creaked with heat, and the embers began to rise. Inside the house were his children, dozens of them, laughing, playing, unaware. He called out to them from the courtyard, "Come out, the house is burning." But the children only blinked. The house was all they had known. It was familiar, full of games and colors and corners to hide. They did not see the danger. They did not feel the urgency. They went on playing. The man's heart pounded. The flames licked closer. If he shouted again, they might ignore him. If he ran in to fetch them, the structure might collapse. So instead, he tried something else. He called out again, not with panic, but with a new offer. "Children, come outside. There are carts waiting for you. Goat carts, deer carts, ox carts, pulled by beautiful animals adorned with bells and gold. Come now, and they are yours." The children stopped, looked up, and ran out of the burning house in delight. safe, laughing, alive. But when they reached the courtyard, there were no goat carts or deer carts. Only one great cart, drawn by a white ox, sturdy, wide, strong, more magnificent than they could have imagined. And the father, calm now, relieved, invited each child onto the cart. It would carry them far from danger. It would hold them safely. This is the parable of the burning house, one of the most famous teachings in the Lotus Sutra. It is not about deception. It is about skillful means, what Mahayana Buddhism calls upaya. It is about the wisdom to speak not with rigid truth, but with compassion shaped to the listener's heart. The father in the story is the Buddha. The burning house is samsara, the world of illusion, suffering, impermanence. The children are us, unaware, absorbed in our games, our distractions, our beliefs that everything is fine. And the carts? They are the paths, the ways we are called out of delusion. Sometimes we need promises. Sometimes we need symbols. Sometimes we come to practice seeking peace or healing or clarity. These may not be ultimate truth, but they are ways out of the fire. And the Buddha, seeing this, offers whatever will work, not to lie, but to save. Truth is not always about telling the whole thing at once. Sometimes it's about offering a step forward, a thread through the smoke, a voice that reaches someone where they are, not where they should be. There is a famous Mahayana saying, "The Dharma is like a raft used to cross the river, but once across, you don't carry the raft on your back." In the same way, the Buddha does not cling to doctrines. He uses teachings as tools and discards them when they no longer serve. In the story, the children are not punished for believing in goat carts, because the Buddha is not interested in being right. He is interested in awakening, and if it takes a golden bell or a beautiful cart to bring someone to safety, then so be it, because wisdom without compassion is incomplete. Sometimes we do the same. We come to practice for small reasons. We want to breathe better, to sleep more easily, to escape stress, but slowly, something shifts. The real ox cart arrives. The deeper teachings come. We begin to see the house for what it is. We begin to wake up, not just from the flames, but from the idea that we ever truly belonged inside them. This story teaches us about timing, about patience, about knowing that not every truth needs to be told at once, and that helping others awaken is not about shouting, "The house is on fire." It's about seeing what they hear, what they fear, what they love, and then speaking to that. The Buddha could have thundered teachings from the sky. He could have demanded obedience. Instead, he walked with people, listened, adapted, and then gave them the vehicle they were ready for. Some criticize this parable. They say, "Wasn't it a lie?" But what matters is the result. The children were safe, and the vehicle they received was not lesser, but greater. They were drawn to joy, but found liberation. Sometimes a mother tells a child there are stars hiding behind the clouds, not to mislead, but to soothe. And the stars are there. Sometimes a doctor gives medicine sweetened with honey, because healing must be palatable, not just potent. And so too with the Dharma, it meets us where we are, and leads us to where we didn't even know we could go. The burning house is this world. Not because the world is evil, but because it cannot last. Everything inside it, pleasure, power, possession, even identity, will one day fall. But the Buddha doesn't shame us for being inside. He simply calls us out, however he can. You may be on a goat-cart path now, or waiting by the door, or still deep inside the house, holding on to something you love. It's okay. You are seen, and when you're ready, there will be a voice and a cart and a way through the smoke. In the 17th century, Japan was changing. Temples were quiet. Monks walked with their hands folded inside sleeves, heads bowed against the cold wind of politics, poverty, and war. But in Kyoto, a monk named Tetsugen Doko had a dream: to bring the sutras, the sacred texts of the Buddha, to the people. Not locked away in elite monasteries, not spoken only in the high Chinese script of scholars, but printed in Japanese, on paper, so the common farmer, the weaver, the rice merchant, and the child sweeping the temple steps could read the Buddha's words. He would print them, all of them, in woodblock form, an enormous undertaking. Tetsugen began with nothing, no paper, no ink, no press, no woodblocks, just a robe, a bowl, and a vow. So he traveled the countryside, bowl in hand, asking for donations, not for himself, but for the words of the Dharma. At first, people were skeptical. A monk with no monastery, a printing press as a spiritual act. But Tetsugen spoke with quiet conviction. He did not pressure. He did not persuade. He simply bowed and spoke of a dream where truth could be read by all. And slowly, the donations came. Coins, rice, a silver hairpin from a widow, a child's carved flute. One woman brought a single perfect sheet of handmade paper and said, "I cannot read, but may this help someone who can." Years passed. Tetsugen traveled through mountain towns and port cities. He walked in sun, in snow, in silence. The money piled up, not in bags, but in faith, until finally, he had enough. Enough for paper, ink, carvers, labor. The work could begin, but then disaster struck. The Uji River flooded. A great famine swept across the land. Families went hungry. Children cried into bowls of water. And Tetsugen looked at the money he had gathered. He did not hesitate. He gave every coin to relief. Food was bought, homes were rebuilt, the suffering eased, and the printing dream disappeared for a time. When the crisis passed, Tetsugen began again. From zero, bowl in hand, dust on his feet. The same quiet voice, the same calm vow. This time, people gave more quickly. They remembered, they trusted. He gathered enough once more. The press was readied, woodblocks carved. Then, epidemic. A plague swept through Kyoto. The poor collapsed in alleys. Temples turned into infirmaries. And once again, Tetsugen gave all the money away. The third time, he began again. Older now, slower, but steady. His vow never cracked, and after many years, the sutras were finally printed in 7,000 woodblocks, hand-carved and inked with devotion. The first complete Japanese printing of the Buddhist canon. Even today, the blocks are preserved at Obaku Monastery in Kyoto. a monument to patience, to persistence, to presence. But ask a Zen master about Tetsugen's sutras, and they will smile and say, yes, he printed 3 editions, but the first 2 are the most beautiful. Commentary. Zen is not impressed by grand gestures, it is moved by quiet truth. Tetsugen's vow was not to ink, not to paper, but to service. And so, when suffering appeared, he did not cling to his dream. He let it go, not out of failure, but out of deeper practice. The first 2 editions were never printed, but they were lived. Printed in rice, in shelter, in the body of a starving child who lived because of his decision. Printed in the woman who kept her husband another year because Tetsugen paid for medicine instead of woodblocks. Printed in the hearts of strangers who saw that the Dharma is not words, but action. The 3rd edition, that was just the form. The content had already been carved in compassion. Tetsugen teaches us, your vow is not what you say when it's easy. It's what you do when it costs you. And in those moments, when your deepest aspiration must bend to the needs of others, that is the real test of the way. We all have sutras we want to print, projects, dreams, a book, a vision, a calling. And often, the world interrupts, crisis, illness, family, but Zen does not see this as failure. It sees it as opportunity to offer, to release, to serve something greater than the plan. And when the time is right, you return, you begin again. Because nothing is lost. Each pause is part of the rhythm. Each surrender shapes the heart. Each detour deepens the vow. There is no need to rush. If the heart remains clear, even a delay becomes Dharma. Even an interruption becomes a verse. Even a famine becomes a teaching. Tetsugen walked the mountains for decades, but the greatest thing he carried was patience, a faith that giving is not giving up, and that sometimes the invisible sutras are the ones that save us most. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. It began in the hush before dawn, when the breath of the world still rested and time itself seemed unsure whether to move forward. In the palace of Kapilavastu, marble pillars loomed like frozen trees, casting long shadows across the corridors. Every corner, every curtain, every tapestry whispered of wealth and beauty. But the prince, Siddhartha, had stopped hearing the music in it. He had seen what no prince was meant to see: old age, sickness, death, and a seeker who walked without fear. In the days that followed the 4 sights, Siddhartha moved through the palace like a man carrying a secret too heavy to name. He sat through the court banquets without appetite. He watched dancers move in silk, their feet light as feathers, but his thoughts moved heavier than stone. Yasodhara, his wife, had noticed his silence. She placed her hand gently over his, but it trembled. Rahula, their newborn son, reached for him with tiny fingers, but Siddhartha's eyes filled with both love and sorrow. He did not lack affection, he lacked answers. That night the moon hung low and golden in the sky, a silent witness to the choice being made within royal walls. The city of Kapilavastu lay sleeping, its gates shut, its guards at rest, its people dreaming of festivals and fortunes. But inside Siddhartha's chamber, there was no sleep. He stood over his son's cradle, his gaze long and quiet. Rahula stirred, then stilled again. Siddhartha touched the boy's cheek, memorizing the softness. A father's heart broke quietly inside him. A part of him longed to stay, to watch this child grow, to hold Yasudhara as the years passed. But another part of him, the deeper part, knew that to truly love them, he had to leave. Not for escape, not for abandonment, but to find an end to the suffering that would one day find them all. He crossed the chamber in silence, his footsteps bare. He passed the sleeping guards with a nod of gratitude. He paused once in the marble garden, where fountains trickled like stilled song. Stars wheeled above him in still constellations. Waiting at the outer gate was Channa, his loyal charioteer, and Kanthaka, his white horse who had carried him through battles, festivals, and boyhood rides under open skies. Siddhartha took one last look at the palace that had been his whole world. Then he nodded. No orders, no drums, no farewell speech, just stillness and the beginning of something eternal. Channa led them through side streets. Siddhartha's cloak billowed slightly in the breeze, though the air was warm. As they neared the city gates, it is said the gods themselves descended to still the sound of hooves and hinges. The gatekeeper slept on, unaware that the one who was born to inherit the throne was walking away from it forever. Miles passed beneath them, past farmlands and shrines, past temples and banyan trees, and as dawn neared, they reached the forest's edge. There, beneath a fig tree bathed in pale starlight, Siddhartha dismounted. He stepped away from the saddle and removed his crown. It was heavy, not in gold, but in memory. He untied his earrings and placed them gently in Channa's hands. Then, drawing his sword, he cut away his long, dark hair, symbol of his royalty, of his past. He let the strands fall into the wind. He removed his silken robes, folding them with reverence, and exchanged them for a simple cloth robe, earth-coloured and plain. Then he turned to Channa. "Take Kanthaka home," he said softly. "Tell my father I have not left in rebellion, but in search of that which is beyond birth and death." Channa's eyes filled with tears. "My lord, may I not follow you?" Siddhartha placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You will serve the Dharma more by returning than by following. Go. Tell them I am not lost. Tell them I am becoming." It is said that Kanthaka cried as he was led away. Some say the noble horse died of grief, his heart broken by parting. Others say his spirit was reborn among the stars. But Siddhartha did not look back. Barefoot, stripped of every title and comfort, he stepped into the forest. Birds stirred in the canopy. Mist hung low over the earth. The world ahead was wild and wide, but in that moment, he felt lighter than he ever had. No walls, no servants, no titles, just breathe, and the path. He walked deeper, alone, the forest accepting him without question. He drank from rivers, sat beneath trees, listened to wind move through leaves. He began to study with sages and ascetics, learning from their fire rituals and their breath practices, their renunciations and their silences. He fasted until his ribs showed like shadows. He sat still until ants walked over his knees. But in all this, he remained watchful. For he knew that extreme indulgence had not brought peace. And now he saw that extreme denial did not either. His journey would continue, but it had already begun. The great departure was not just a leaving, it was a shedding. Not just of privilege, but of illusion. The prince became a wanderer. The heir became a seeker. And the world, though it did not know it yet, was about to change. Because one man had dared to step outside the gates and walk silently, humbly toward truth. He was the oldest monk in the monastery. No one quite remembered when he had arrived. He had been there before the abbot, before the bell tower was built, before the bamboo grove behind the kitchen had taken root. They called him Elder Wen. His robe was patched at the sleeves, his back curved like a bowed reed, and his eyes were always smiling, like he had seen something long ago and never forgotten it. He didn't teach, not formally, but every morning he lit the incense before dawn. Every afternoon he watered the moss around the garden stones, and in the evening he swept the meditation hall in silence, the broom moving in time with his breath. You could walk past him and miss him entirely, unless you were paying attention. Then you would feel it, that quiet radiance, like sitting near a warm lamp on a winter night. One spring, Elder Wen stopped coming to morning service. He didn't light the incense, didn't sweep, didn't bow. He stayed in his small corner room beside the main hall, lying on his straw mat with hands folded gently over his chest. He was dying. The news spread quickly. Monks whispered in the corridors. Some feared, some mourned. Some tried to distract themselves with chores. But one by one, they made their way to his room. To say goodbye, to ask for wisdom, to seek some final teaching. But Elder Wen said almost nothing. He just smiled. That same soft smile, unmoved by sorrow, unafraid of what came next. One young monk sat at his side and finally asked, "Master, are you not afraid?" Elder Wen opened his eyes. "Afraid of what?" he whispered. "Of leaving." The old monk chuckled softly, a sound like wind through dry leaves. "Leave where?" He looked around his humble room. "There is nowhere to go." Another monk asked, "What is your final instruction?" Elder Wen blinked slowly, then raised one trembling hand and pointed to the teacup beside his bed. It was half full. The tea had long gone cold, but the sunlight touched it just so, glinting off the rim. He smiled again, then closed his eyes, and that evening he passed. As gently as a flame curling into smoke. No struggle, no fanfare, just a long exhale and stillness. The monks held a memorial. They chanted sutras. They carried his body wrapped in white cloth to the forest. But what they remembered most was not the ceremony. It was the smile. This is the story of death without fear. The final bow of a life lived in awareness. Commentary. In the West, we prepare for death with wills, hospitals, and quiet dread. We pretend it is far away, or we avoid it entirely. But in Zen, death is not the enemy. It is the mirror that shows you whether you were truly alive. Elder Wen was not afraid because he had already practiced dying. Every time he let go of a grudge, every time he stepped aside for someone younger, every time he bowed in silence, releasing his self-importance. The teacup was his final teaching, so ordinary, so overlooked, but it held the whole Dharma. A cup is useful because it is empty. It can hold, receive, release. But if you cling to the cup itself, you miss the tea. If you fear the cup breaking, you never enjoy what it holds. Elder Wen was ready to leave because he had drunk deeply of life. He had tasted the tea, and he didn't cling to the cup. There's a Zen saying, "Let death come like a welcome guest." That doesn't mean we rush toward it. It means we don't turn our back on it. We live with it, like a quiet friend who reminds us not to waste time. Elder Wen's room is empty now, but the moss he watered still thrives. The broom still leans against the wall. The teacup still rests on the low table, cleaned and dry. And his smile lives in the memory of every monk who sat beside him and realized, stillness is not defeat. Stillness is trust. You do not need to fear the end. You only need to live in such a way that when it comes, you can greet it with a breath and a smile. The sun rose slowly over the wide green fields, brushing the tops of the grass with gold. Mist drifted over the earth like breath from a dreaming world. And in a quiet corner of the meadow, where the stalks grew thick and the wind passed gently, lived a flock of quail. They were small birds, light-boned and quick, their feathers dappled like earth and sunlight. They lived simply, eating seeds, singing softly, and moving together like a single thought. And among them was one who saw more than the others, who watched not only the sky and the grass, but the patterns within them. He was the Buddha in a past life, and though he had no title or special perch, the others came to trust him, because he noticed what they missed, and he saw what was coming. Each day, the flock flew out into the fields to feed. Each day they returned, wings beating as one, hearts light. But one morning, as the sun rose pale behind thin clouds, the wise quail called the others close. "There is danger coming," he said. The flock stilled. "A fowler is near. He lays traps in the tall grass. If we are not careful, we will be taken." Some of the younger birds flapped their wings in alarm. "Should we stop flying?" asked one. "No," said the wise quail, "but we must act together." He showed them a plan. "If one is caught in the net," he said, "do not panic. Each of us must place our beaks beneath the net. At the same moment, we will lift and fly." "To freedom?" a small chick asked. He nodded. "Yes, together." The flock agreed, and the very next day, the net came. It was hidden beneath the dew-wet grass. A few birds landed without seeing it. With a sudden pull, the fowler sprang the trap. Wings fluttered, cries rang out. But the wise quail shouted, "Now!" as we practiced. The others rushed in, beaks down, wings strong. And together they rose, the net lifted with them, light as silk on the wind. And just beyond the trees, they dropped it, free once more. The fowler, watching from behind a tree, blinked. "Strange," he muttered. "I've never seen birds do that." He returned the next day, and again the next. Each time the net was lifted. Each time the birds escaped. He grew frustrated. "Clever little things," he muttered. "But they won't always be united." And he was right. Because fear does not break the flock, but ego can. One morning, two young quail quarreled. "You always land too close," snapped one. "You always peck too fast," the other retorted. Their voices rose. The others turned away, uncomfortable. The wise quail approached them gently. "Remember," he said, "the net does not care who is right, only who is divided." But pride had taken root. The quarrel continued. And the next day, when the net fell again, something changed. The two angry quail were caught. The others flew in, ready to help. "Lift with us," they called. But the two snapped at each other. "You grab that side!" "No, you're too slow." Their beaks tangled, their wings struck each other, and in the confusion, the net stayed down. The fowler emerged from the trees, and that day, not all escaped. The survivors gathered in silence beneath a low fig tree. Even the wind was still. The wise quail spoke, not in anger, but with sorrow. Together we can lift what traps us, but alone, even a feather becomes too heavy. In time, the flock mended. The young quail apologized, and the net, though dangerous, was never as strong as their unity. The fowler eventually gave up and moved on, and the wise quail remained, never seeking attention, never blaming, but always watching, always reminding them it is not the trap that captures us. It is forgetting that we are stronger together. In quiet monasteries, monks would later chant this story beneath swaying trees. They would bow not to the birds, but to the truth they carried. That unity is not just comfort, it is survival. Because in this world, nets will fall. But if we move with one breath, with one purpose, with one heart, even the strongest snare cannot hold us. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. It started like any other Monday. The inbox blinked with urgency. 142 unread. A blinking red light on the office phone. Calendar blocks stacked like bricks. Slack notifications multiplying like rabbits in spring. Julian sipped lukewarm coffee and took a deep breath. Then he dove in. He was efficient, smart, reliable, they called him. Always responsive. Always ready. Always tired. Somewhere between the 7th reply and the 4th Zoom call, he noticed his chest tightening. Nothing sharp, just a quiet constriction, a warning like a traffic light blinking yellow. But he kept going, because the world rewarded output. And silence. Silence didn't show up on KP is. By 4 p.m, his eyes burned. By 6 p.m, he was still typing. He didn't hear the rain start, didn't notice the tea growing cold beside his keyboard, until a calendar reminder popped up. Meditation class, 6:30 p.m, room 4B. He had signed up weeks ago, half joking, a resolution maybe. He almost closed the tab, but something, maybe the silence behind the noise, nudged him. Room 4B was warm, soft lighting, folded cushions, a bell. Only 6 people sat in the circle. A woman at the front, maybe late 40s, calm-eyed, greeted him with a nod, not words. "Sit however you like," she said. Julian sat stiffly, still in his button-up, still full of digital momentum. The teacher closed her eyes, spoke gently. Let the inbox go. Let the to-do list drop its grip. Notice the breath, that's all. Julian's mind raced. The Henderson file, the Q4 budget, the message he forgot to reply to. But the bell rang again, soft and clear, like a sound not trying to impress anyone. And slowly, his thoughts became less sticky. After 20 minutes, she said, "Busy is not always bad, but sometimes it's a way of avoiding stillness. Ask yourself, what would I hear if I stopped pretending I didn't have time to listen?" Julian felt something twist. Not painfully, just honestly, because beneath the notifications and meetings and perfectly managed chaos was a quiet voice he hadn't heard in years. It didn't ask for much, just a pause, a breath, a life lived on purpose, not just performed. That night, he walked home in the rain. No umbrella, no rush. Each raindrop felt like punctuation in a sentence he had forgotten how to read. The next morning, his inbox was just as full, but he didn't open it right away. He brewed tea, sat for 5 minutes, watched the steam rise and disappear. And in those 5 minutes, he remembered he was alive, not just employed. Julian didn't quit his job, didn't move to the mountains. He still answered emails, still ran meetings. But once a day, he closed the laptop, turned off the noise, and let the silence speak. The Buddha never warned about email, but he did say, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Sometimes peace is not found in responding faster. It's found in not responding at all, at least for a moment. In the still hush before dawn, the palace of Kapilavastu stirred with the soft rustle of silks and the distant rhythm of footfalls on marble. The world outside was already unfolding, but within the gilded walls where Prince Siddhartha lived, every petal was sheltered from the wind of suffering. No wrinkles marred the faces of the attendants. No cries of illness echoed through the halls. No one spoke of death. His father, King Suddhodana, had ensured that his son knew only ease, beauty, and delight. The astrologers had predicted that the young prince would become either a great king or a holy man who would renounce the world. Fearing the latter, the king built a world without shadows. Flowers were changed before they wilted. Servants were chosen for their youth and radiance. Pain was not allowed to show its face. But truth, like the sun, cannot be hidden forever, and yearning, like a seed buried deep, will reach for the light even through stone. On a day shaped like any other, Siddhartha requested to ride beyond the palace gates. He was 29, cloaked in fine fabric and surrounded by careful illusions. Yet something inside him whispered of incompleteness, like a bell struck in the distance that would not stop ringing. There was a tightness in his chest he could not name, a hollowness that no feast or dance could fill. The charioteer Channa guided the prince through the streets of the city. The morning was bright, the people beautiful, the air filled with jasmine. Musicians played in courtyards, children laughed in sunbeams, all seemed perfect. But then the illusion cracked. At the edge of a quiet street, they saw a man hunched and trembling. His hair was white, his back bowed by years. His skin sagged like parchment, and his hands clutched a stick. He moved slowly, as though the air itself had thickened around him. Siddhartha leaned forward. "Channa," he asked, "what is wrong with that man?" "That is old age, my lord," Channa replied. "It comes to all who live long. The body weakens, the bones bend, the senses dull. No one escapes it." The prince stared at the man as he passed, the way he paused to catch his breath, the way his eyes seemed clouded with time. Siddhartha's hands gripped the side of the chariot. "Will this come to me?" he asked. "Yes, my lord, to you, to me, to all." Siddhartha fell silent. The first veil had lifted. The garden he had lived in was not eternal. Beneath the fragrance was decay. Beneath the music was silence. The next day, restless and inwardly stirred, he asked to go again. And again the world revealed another layer. As they turned a corner, Siddhartha saw a man collapsed by the roadside. His face was contorted in pain, his skin grey and clammy. His limbs twisted unnaturally, and he coughed as if his lungs were full of fire. "And this?" Siddhartha asked. "This is sickness, my lord," Channa said gently. "It strikes without warning. It takes the strong and lays them low. There is no rank or title that shields against it." The prince watched as a woman tried to cool the man's brow, her eyes wide with helplessness. A child clung to her skirts. Siddhartha turned away, but the image would not leave him. How many in his palace had hidden such suffering behind closed doors? How much of the world had he not seen? On the third day, the air hung heavy with heat. A solemn hush drifted through the streets. Siddhartha and Channa followed the sound of quiet chanting and saw a procession winding through the alleys. Men carried a shrouded form on a wooden bier, garlands laid across it. Behind them, mourners walked with bowed heads, incense curling in the air. "Is he asleep?" the prince asked, though he already knew. "He is dead, my lord," Channa replied. "This is the fate of all who are born." The prince felt something deep within him fracture. He watched the faces of the mourners, their grief like a tide with no shore. The man on the bier would never speak again, never eat, never laugh. All that he was had ended. And this comes to everyone. "Everyone, my lord. The rich, the poor, the wise, the foolish." Siddhartha did not speak on the way back. The chariot wheels hummed against the stone, but his thoughts made no sound. The world had split open. Beneath the silks, beneath the pleasures, there was something hollow, a truth too vast to ignore. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. His wife, Yasodhara, slept beside him. Their son, Rahula, breathed softly in the next room. And yet, peace evaded him. He saw the old man, the sick man, the corpse. He saw them behind every smile, beneath every ornament. He knew now that no palace could protect against time. No love could shield against loss. No beauty could outpace decay. And then, on the fourth day, they rode out once more. This time, they saw a man in saffron robes, walking barefoot along the path. His eyes were calm, his steps steady. He carried no gold, wore no jewelry. His face bore the lines of both suffering and peace. "Who is that?" Siddhartha asked. "A seeker, my lord," Channa said. "One who has renounced the world to find the path beyond birth and death. One who walks in search of freedom." Siddhartha watched him until he vanished into the distance. No guards flanked him, no luxuries trailed behind, and yet something about the man radiated a serenity deeper than anything Siddhartha had known. That night, the prince stood at the edge of his sleeping son's cradle, not daring to wake him. He touched the boy's soft cheek, his heart torn between two loves, the love of his family and the love of truth. He stepped into the garden one last time, its scent bittersweet. He bowed before the moonlit statue of his ancestors, and with each step toward the gate, he shed a piece of his former self, his earrings, his sword, his silks. He left that night, into the forest, into silence, into the unknown. The four sights had shattered his illusion, but they had also opened the gate. And on the other side of that gate was the beginning of a path. The path that would change the world. There was once a kingdom where wisdom was prized like gold. Rulers held council with monks. Children learned not only how to count, but how to think. And among its most respected voices was a wandering teacher known simply as the Buddha. He did not wear jewels, he did not shout, but when he spoke, even the birds seemed to pause. And one day, in the town square of a village nestled near the banks of the Ganges, he told a story. Not to entertain, but to reveal. The dispute began with laughter, then sharp words. A group of scholars, each confident in his own tradition, had come to debate. Some were Brahmins, others were ascetics. A few belonged to newer sects, filled with fiery conviction and scrolls still smelling of fresh ink. They spoke of truth, of soul, of self, of afterlife, of permanence, of nothingness. Each man insisted his view was the whole, complete, correct. The others, misguided, foolish, dangerous. They argued beneath a fig tree, loud enough that passers-by turned to look. A merchant chuckled, a potter shook his head, a child pointed and whispered, "They sound like crows fighting over the same grain." When the Buddha arrived, he did not interrupt. He simply sat and waited, until their voices began to falter, some from exhaustion, some from shame. And into that space, he placed his voice like a drop of water on a still pond. "There was once a king," the Buddha began, "who summoned 6 men born blind since birth." The scholars fell quiet. The king told them, "I will allow you to encounter something magnificent. Tell me what it is." The blind men were curious, eager. They were led one by one to a massive animal they had never known, a mighty elephant. Each man was guided to touch a different part. The first reached out and felt the flank. He pressed his palms against its broad, warm side and declared, "Ah, an elephant is like a wall, wide and unmoving." The second grasped the tusk, smooth and curved like polished stone. "No, no," he said. "An elephant is like a spear, sharp and strong." The third took hold of the trunk, which coiled and shifted in his arms. "You're both wrong. It is like a snake, alive, twisting, breathing." The fourth felt the knee, round and solid. "Clearly, it is like a tree trunk," he announced, "thick and rooted." The fifth wrapped his hands around the ear, which flapped gently like a fan. "You are mistaken. An elephant is a large fan, waving back and forth." The last man touched the tail, thin and rope-like. "No, no, it's a rope. A coarse, swaying rope." When they were brought back together, the king asked, "Well, what is an elephant?" and the shouting began. Each man insisted he was right. Each accused the others of ignorance. Each swore he had touched the truth with his own hands. And in a way, they had. The Buddha paused. The scholars sat frozen, the parable hanging in the air like incense smoke. Each man, he said, encountered only a part. Each was sincere, each described what he felt, and yet none saw the whole. He looked at each scholar now, gently, without judgment. So it is with many truths. You may touch a piece and call it the whole, but when clinging to fragments, conflict follows. One of the younger scholars frowned. "But teacher," he said slowly, "does that mean there is no truth?" The Buddha smiled, not to mock, but to soften. "Number, it means that truth is vast, and the mind must be vast to hold it. One who sees the trunk and believes it is a snake is not lying, but he is also not seeing clearly." Another monk, one who had remained quiet through the debate, bowed. "And what, Blessed One, is the way to see the whole?" The Buddha turned his palm upward, a gesture of openness. "Humility, listening, letting go of the need to be right. When you stop clinging to your peace, you make space for someone else's. And in that space, something greater may arise." The fig tree rustled gently above them. A breeze passed through the square. The tension had broken. One of the elders leaned forward. His voice was softer now. "I have spent my life defending what I thought was the whole elephant, but now I wonder if I have only touched the tail." The Buddha nodded. "Then you are further along the path than many who still cling to the tusk." That night, as lamps flickered in the homes of the village, the story traveled from mouth to mouth. Children reenacted the blind men, bumping into trees and miming trunks and tails. Elders sat in circles, wondering what part they had touched in their own lives, what truths they had guarded too tightly. And in one small home, a young girl asked her grandmother, "What does the whole elephant look like?" The old woman smiled. "We may never know for sure," she said. "But if we all share what we felt, maybe we can come closer." And so, the parable of the blind men and the elephant was passed on, not as a warning against belief, but as an invitation to perspective, to listen, to learn, to let go of the walls we build around our understanding. Centuries later, the story would still be told, in temples, in schools, in circles of debate and doubt. And always, it would whisper the same truth. No one sees everything, but together we can see more. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. The banks of the Ganges shimmered with morning light. Mist curled like white breath from the earth, and birds traced wide arcs above the water. The river flowed as it always had, unhurried, ancient, indifferent. Upon a small rise near the city of Gaya, the Buddha stood. His saffron robes caught the first golden threads of sunlight, and his presence seemed to quiet even the wind. Around him gathered 1,000 ascetics, silent, weathered, lean with years of discipline. Their robes were coarse, their skin bronzed by fire and wind. Their eyes held questions that words could not form. They had come to hear him, not because he promised liberation, but because he had found it. These were men who had walked barefoot on burning sand, who had held their breath until stars blurred in their vision, who had fasted until even hunger grew silent. They had known pain. They had studied sacred fire. They had chanted, scarred, endured. But they had not known peace. And so they came, not to challenge, but to listen. The Buddha began not with praise, nor with rules, nor with doctrine. He began with fire. All is burning, he said. A ripple moved through the crowd like wind across tall grass. He paused, let the silence stretch, like the space between flames. All is burning, he repeated. The I is burning, forms are burning, I consciousness is burning. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word striking like a drumbeat in the still morning air. Burning with what? With the fire of lust, the fire of hatred, the fire of delusion? Some closed their eyes, others frowned. A few leaned forward, their breaths caught. The Buddha looked upon them, not with challenge, but with compassion. This body you cling to, he said, it is a wick. This mind you chase through craving, a spark. And each time you grasp, each time you say, mine, you feed the fire. A breeze moved across the Ganges. It stirred the edges of robes. It cooled nothing. The Buddha continued. The world is ablaze, but not with wood and coal. It burns with longing, with grasping, with thirst. He walked slowly among them, not above, not apart. His steps made no sound. Eyes that chase beauty, ears that crave praise, tongues that seek sweetness, minds that hunger for permanence. He turned and lifted his simple alms bowl. This too is not mine. It holds food today. Tomorrow, it may be empty. I thank it either way. From the back, an old ascetic raised his hand. Are we to abandon joy? He asked. Is not joy the goal? The Buddha smiled faintly. No, he said. Not joy. Only the craving for joy. Let joy arise. Let it come like wind through trees. But do not chase it. Do not bind to it. Do not say, this is mine. For the flame you grasp will burn your hand. Another monk asked quietly, how do we live in a burning world? The Buddha looked at him with eyes deep as a still lake. Like a man who sees the blaze, he said. Who walks with care, breathes with wisdom, and holds no illusion that the fire is shelter. A hush fell over the gathering, not from fear, but from recognition. The fire was not only in the cities, or in war, or in anger. It was inside them, inside each grasping thought, each clenched desire. The Buddha sat upon the earth. He drew a circle in the dust with his finger. Inside this circle, he said, are your perceptions, your feelings, your ideas. They rise like smoke. They change like flame. They disappear like ash. Do not build your home in a fire. A younger monk, no more than 20 summers old, whispered, then where do we dwell, Master? The Buddha looked up. In awareness, he said. In equanimity. In the space between sparks. Be the witness, not the fuel. The monks bowed their heads. Some wept, not from sorrow, but from something else. From release, from clarity, from the sudden lightness of realizing they could put something down. That night, they built no fires. There were no chants, no ceremonies. They ate simply, drank river water, and sat in silence. But the silence was not empty. It was watchful. Each monk sat with his own flickering flame. Some remembered the pain of hunger they had forced upon themselves. Others remembered the pride they had felt when praised for discipline. Some saw anger they had not named, others grief, and they did not suppress these fires. They simply watched. And in the watching, something shifted. Not extinguished, but no longer fed. In the days that followed, the change was quiet but real. Monks who had once worshipped sacred flame, who had walked barefoot on coals, branded their skin, sat in the sun for days, now turned to a gentler discipline. They practiced release. They rose with the sun. They swept the courtyard slowly. They bowed not to fire, but to understanding. When visitors asked them what the Buddha had taught that morning, they did not recite scriptures. They did not speak of rebirth or karma or cosmology. They said only, "He showed us the fire and told us we did not have to live in it." The fire sermon was spoken many times across the years, but none more powerful than that first morning on the river bank, when the smoke from the city's cooking fires curled upward, mirroring the craving in every heart, and the Buddha, with nothing in his hands and peace in his gaze, simply said, "Let it burn, let it pass, and do not be consumed." It was still dark when the monk lit the kitchen fire. Outside, the mountain air clung to the stones like breath not yet exhaled. Frost kissed the corners of the monastery walls, and the wind had not yet stirred the bell. But inside, the kitchen was alive. The Tenzo, the head cook, moved with quiet care. He chopped vegetables with reverence, washed rice as though touching the Dharma, boiled water like preparing an offering to the unseen. Not because guests were coming, not because someone was watching, but because every movement was practice. In Zen monasteries, the Tenzo is not just a cook. He is a teacher, a practitioner, a guardian of presence. His role is not low, it is sacred, because Zen does not draw lines between spiritual and ordinary. It dissolves them, and what remains is just this moment. And this moment includes rice. The great Zen master Dogen once wrote a full text on this, instructions for the Tenzo. He said, "Do not treat cooking lightly. When you cook rice, wash your mind. When you slice roots, cut away delusion." He had learned this lesson young. When Dogen first arrived in China seeking true Dharma, he met an elderly Tenzo in a seaside monastery. The man was in his 60s, sun-worn, with sleeves rolled and hands deep in soaking beans. Dogen bowed respectfully. "Venerable one," he said, "why do you, at your age and rank, work in the kitchen?" The old monk looked up and said, "If not me, then who? And if not now, then when?" Dogen offered to help. The Tenzo smiled. "Thank you," he said, "but this is my practice." Later that day, Dogen saw the same monk drying mushrooms in the sun. He asked, "Why not do this tomorrow? The sun will rise again." The Tenzo simply said, "I do not wait for tomorrow's sun. My life is today." And in that moment, Dogen understood something deeper than scripture. That enlightenment is not found apart from daily life, but within it. in the steam rising from a pot, in the rhythm of chopping, in the patience of stirring porridge without haste. Years later, as a master, Dogen taught his students, when you cook, just cook. Don't think, I am cooking. Don't think, this is just food. Don't think, this is not meditation. Make every motion the expression of the way. In the monastery, the Tenzo bows before entering the kitchen. He arranges the knives, washes the board. He does not multitask. He does not rush. When he stirs everything. When he scrubs the pot, he scrubs the self. There is no low task, only low awareness. There is a koan that asks, what is Buddha? One master answered, 3 pounds of flax. Another said, the rice cake on the shelf. Because Zen knows, the sacred hides in plain sight. Not above us, not beyond us, but within the ordinary, when seen without distraction. In modern life, we resist this. We see chores as interruptions, dishes as delays, errands as obstacles to real practice. But Zen asks, what if the very thing you're avoiding is your path? What if folding laundry is a bow? What if sweeping the floor is a blessing? What if cleaning the toilet is a teaching and letting go? The Tenzo is not trying to finish cooking. He is inhabiting it, with full presence, with full breath, with no need for applause, because practice is not what we do on the cushion, it is how we live off it. Dogen wrote, see with your ears, hear with your eyes, prepare the food with your whole body-mind. Not poetry, not metaphor, instruction to become so present that the boundaries dissolve. To listen to the rice as it boils, to feel the carrot before slicing, to bow to the ladle before lifting it, because when we fully meet a moment, there is no self left to be enlightened. Only the moment, only the rice, only the breath. Once, a student complained, Master, I have no time for meditation. I spend all day in the kitchen. The master asked, do you wash the rice? Yes. Do you chop the greens? Yes. Then why do you call that not meditating? Commentary. Zen dismantles the hierarchy between sacred and mundane. It reminds us, you don't need incense to wake up. You don't need chants to be present. You need rice and a spoon, and the willingness to give yourself to both without resistance. If you're waiting for your life to get quieter before you practice, you may wait forever. But if you meet this moment, this task, as the way itself, then even the laundry becomes a sutra. Even the shopping list becomes a mantra. Even the broom becomes your teacher. The Tenzo is not just feeding bodies, he is cooking truth. And when the pot is washed, the ladle hung, and the kitchen swept, there is nothing left to attain, because it was never somewhere else. It was always here. In the steam, in the stillness, in the rhythm of this one breath. The temple's library held thousands of texts, worn scrolls, faded sutras, ink-smudged commentaries written by hands long returned to dust. Monks came to read by daylight when the sun filtered through paper screens, and the scent of old parchment warmed the air. But one monk always came at night. Her name was May. She was quiet, thoughtful, the kind who listened longer than she spoke. Each evening, after her chores were done, she would carry a single candle into the library and read until wax melted low. One night during the rainy season, the wind howled across the hillside. Storm clouds swallowed the moon. Still, May entered the library, lit her candle, sat cross-legged before a scroll on emptiness. The flame flickered with every gust, but she kept reading. Outside, an owl perched in the eaves, white-feathered, wide-eyed. Still, it watched her, unblinking. As the wind swirled harder, the flame bent. Then, it went out. Darkness, total. May did not panic. She closed her eyes and waited. After a moment, she noticed a soft rustling overhead, feathers, then stillness again. She opened her eyes, and though she could see nothing, she sensed the owl was still there. Watching, she whispered aloud, "How do you see in this?" As if in answer, a line from the sutra she had just read returned to her. "The eye that sees true is not of flesh or flame, but of calm presence in the dark." She smiled softly. Perhaps the lesson wasn't in the candlelight, but in its absence. The next day, she spoke with the abbot. "Master," she asked, "why do we fear the dark so much?" He thought for a while. "Because we trust only what the eye can see. But true wisdom," he said, "often waits in the dark." He continued, "The owl does not light a lantern. It simply sees." From that night on, May still brought her candle, but she also learned to sit after it burned out, not to read, but to observe her breath, her thoughts, her discomfort. And slowly the dark became a teacher. Other monks noticed. May was calmer, slower to speak, gentler when correcting mistakes, as if she no longer needed light to know what mattered. One night, a novice joined her. He fidgeted, grumbled at the dark. "I can't see anything," he said. May smiled. "That's the beginning," she said, "not the problem." There's a Zen saying, "Don't curse the dark, don't worship the light, become the eye that sees in both." The owl never flew down, never made a sound, but its lesson stayed with May until the end of her days. Sometimes, the truest clarity isn't found by shining more light, but by learning to sit still when the candle goes out. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. The wind in Lumbini moved gently, like breath held between two worlds. It was spring, the trees were in bloom, and the sal branches swayed with the weight of 1,000 white blossoms, drifting like snow through sunlight. The grove itself had always been sacred, but on this day, it held its breath, because something was about to happen. Queen Maya of Kapilavastu had travelled far. Her time was near, and by custom, she had chosen to give birth in her family's village. The journey had been long, but gentle. Attendants walked quietly beside her. The sky stayed clear, and the earth itself seemed to soften beneath their steps. When they reached Lumbini, Maya smiled. Here, the air was different, cooler, still. The light filtered through the trees in beams so soft they looked like silk. She stepped down from her carriage, removed her sandals, and walked barefoot into the grove. Birds did not flee. They simply paused. At the center of the grove stood a tall sal tree, wide-branched and flowering. She reached for a low branch and rested her hand upon it. She did not cry out. She did not tremble. She breathed. And there, beneath the trees upon the earth in silence, a child was born. He did not enter with a cry. He entered with awareness. His eyes opened wide, dark and deep like the night before rain. His skin was said to shine with a glow not of this world, and the breeze, once soft, began to stir the leaves as if to sing. Attendants rushed forward. The midwife covered her mouth. The sky turned golden for a breath, and legend says that the flowers on the sal tree bent low to witness. The child did not wait to be carried. He stood. He took 7 steps, and with each step, where his foot touched the ground, a lotus bloomed. Not imagined, not metaphor, but real. Petals unfurled beneath his heels. Fragrance filled the air, and the world paused. Animals stopped their grazing, streams paused their song, and even the wind, surprised by the holiness of the moment, turned back to watch. When the 7th step was taken, the boy raised one hand to the sky and one to the earth. And in a voice that was not learned but remembered, he said, "In this life, I am born for the benefit of all beings. This is my final birth. I will put an end to suffering." It is said that the Devas, gods of distant realms, gathered in silence, their hands folded, their eyes lowered, because something rare had occurred. A bodhisattva, fully awakened in past lives, had returned to walk the earth once more. Heavenly flowers fell through the air. Trumpets sounded without instruments. Celestial beings whispered blessings the humans could not hear. And yet even those on earth, who had no names for such wonders, felt the shift. One man wept without knowing why. One horse knelt in its harness. A pot of rice boiled over though no fire was lit. Something had entered the world, something ancient, and entirely new. He was named Siddhartha, which means he who achieves his aim. In his small face, those who looked closely saw both softness and strength, an ocean of stillness behind the movements of a child. He did not laugh more or cry less than other babies, but when he looked into your eyes, it felt as though he saw through the lifetimes you had forgotten. Queen Maya held him close, felt his heartbeat against her own, but in her heart she knew this child did not belong only to her. He belonged to the world. Word of the birth traveled quickly. When the child was only days old, the king summoned the wise sages of the land. Among them came Asita, an old hermit who lived in the mountains, wrapped in robes the color of ash, with eyes that had watched the turning of many seasons. He entered the palace slowly, carried no staff, asked no favor. He only asked to see the child. When Siddhartha was placed before him, Asita's lips trembled. Tears welled in his eyes, not from sorrow, but from recognition. He bowed low before the infant. And when he rose, he turned to the king. "This child will not rule a kingdom. He will rule the heart. He will not wield armies. He will end suffering. He is destined to become a Buddha, an awakened one. He will show the way beyond sorrow. But I will not live to see his teaching. That is my only sadness." And he bowed once more. The room fell still. Even the oil lamps seemed to lean closer. The king said nothing. The queen held her son more tightly. Maya did not live long after the birth. Some say it was her karma to return to the celestial realm, that to carry a Buddha is to carry a world. And some bodies are made only to hold such grace for a little while. Others say she became his guardian spirit, that she watched from beyond the veil, her presence in every breeze that cooled his fever, every bird that sang outside his window. Siddhartha was raised by her sister. He grew in the lap of comfort. But the memory of the grove, the trees, the moonlit dream, those lived on. Years later, when Siddhartha became the Buddha, he never spoke often of his birth. He taught of suffering, of the path, of breath, of impermanence. But once, when asked what it meant that he had walked on lotus blossoms, he smiled and said, "The path was already beneath me. I did not make it appear, I only stepped where it had always been." Because truth is not invented, it is remembered. Like petals underfoot, waiting to be noticed. And so the child who walked on lotus blossoms became the man who taught others to walk in peace. One step, then another, until suffering too began to bloom into wisdom. In one hand, he carries a book, the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the perfection of wisdom. In the other, he wields a sword, long, luminous, and aflame with clarity. He rides a lion, not to show power, but to symbolize the fearlessness of insight. This is Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, where Avalokiteshvara brings compassion, where Samantabhadra brings vow and action. Manjushri brings the sharp, radiant truth. His name means gentle glory, but his wisdom is not soft. It does not comfort. It cuts. It slices through illusion with the precision of a blade honed on silence. The sword he carries is not for battle. It is for discernment. It separates appearance from reality, self from no self, thought from knowing. It reveals what we are too afraid to see and too free not to see. In the old sutras, it is said that Manjushri's wisdom is so sharp, he was enlightened before the Buddhas of the past. He is the eternal teenager of the Mahayana pantheon, ever young, ever clear, ever unburdened by delusion. Where others hesitate, Manjushri speaks. Where others follow rules, Manjushri asks why. Where others cling to views, Manjushri lets go, again and again and again. One day a monk asked him, "What is the nature of ultimate reality?" And Manjushri drew his sword in the air, then lowered it slowly, as if slicing through something invisible. That was his answer. Because words can't always hold wisdom. Sometimes it must be shown. In Zen temples, the figure of Manjushri is often placed behind the Roshi's seat, not as decoration, but as a reminder that true teaching must be rooted in clarity, that every word spoken should come from a place that has already cut through ego, opinion, attachment. The teacher, like Manjushri, must see clearly before they speak. There is a famous koan. A young monk full of doctrine said to the master, "I've memorized the Heart Sutra. I understand emptiness. There is no I, no ear, no mind, no path, no attainment." The master pointed to a bowl of rice and said, "Then eat, because understanding is not the point. Living is." This is what Manjushri teaches, wisdom that is not locked in scriptures, but embodied, applied, lived. The sword is not aggressive, it is necessary to wake us, to free us, to carve away the clinging and the confusion, until only truth remains. Not an idea, but a mirror with no dust. There's a story told in the mountains. A disciple sat meditating, trying to silence his thoughts. He came to Manjushri in prayer and asked, "Please cut away my illusions." That night, in a dream, Manjushri appeared. He said nothing, only lifted his sword and placed it gently on the disciple's shoulder, not to strike, but to remind him, the blade is not outside you, it is within. Commentary. Manjushri does not give you answers. He gives you the means to see for yourself. That is his wisdom, not dogma, but discernment, not belief, but perception stripped of filter. The sword cuts two ways. It cuts through ignorance, but also through comfort. It forces us to ask, what have I built my life on? And what happens when that is no longer solid? Can I let go? Can I breathe? Even when the ground beneath me vanishes. Wisdom is not knowing more. It is needing less. It is silence that doesn't need applause. It is clarity that does not waver in the dark. It is the ability to sit in confusion and not flinch, to stand before illusion and not bow, to name what is and let go of what is not. The lion Manjushri rides is not a beast of war. It is the mind that has been tamed. The roar is no longer fear. It is the roar of reality unfiltered. The courage to face things as they are. There's a quiet danger in spiritual life. We want wisdom to feel good, to validate us, to comfort the parts of us that ache. But Manjushri reminds us, true wisdom will sometimes hurt. It will dismantle the story we've told ourselves. It will whisper, "You are not who you think you are." And if we listen, the story ends and life begins. In your own practice, the sword appears in many forms. The question you can't answer. The moment you realize you've been wrong. The teacher who looks you in the eye and says nothing because anything they say would only get in the way. That is the sword, cutting gently, so you can see clearly. You don't have to fear it. You have to wield it. In kindness, in honesty, in the decision to no longer live half asleep. When you chant, chant with the sword. When you bow, bow with the sword. When you love, love with the sword. Not to harm, but to see clearly what love is. Because love without wisdom is sentiment, and wisdom without love is cold. But together, they are Manjushri and Avalokiteshvara, and the path itself. The forest was silent. A slow dawn brushed the canopy with gold, and the earth exhaled the cool breath of night. Beneath the tall trees, a single figure sat unmoving, his presence vast, his stillness deeper than the roots below him. This was Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva of great action. Where Avalokiteshvara hears the cries of the world, Samantabhadra responds, not just with compassion, but with commitment, with vow, with doing. In Sanskrit, his name means universal worthy. He is the embodiment of enlightened action, not theoretical, but lived. In temples across East Asia, he is depicted riding a white elephant with 6 tusks, each representing one of the 6 paramitas, perfections of a bodhisattva: generosity, discipline, patience, vigor, meditation, wisdom. The elephant is steady, strong, humble. It does not race. It carries. Because the path of action is not haste. It is devotion. Samantabhadra is not remembered for miracles. He is remembered for vows. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, a vision of infinite Buddhas and worlds, he stands before countless beings and declares, "I vow to honor all Buddhas, to make offerings, to confess mistakes, to rejoice in goodness, to request teaching, to stay in the world, to follow the path, to live for others, to turn the wheel of Dharma, to dedicate all merit for the awakening of all beings." 10 vast vows, 10 immeasurable currents of action. And still, he made more, because Samantabhadra's compassion does not stop at feeling, it becomes form. There's a story told in the mountains of Sichuan. A wandering monk came to a temple where the image of Samantabhadra stood tall, ornate, golden, seated atop the elephant. The monk bowed, then whispered, "Great Bodhisattva, what is your practice?" And in his mind, a voice replied, "Whatever brings benefit, I do it." The monk frowned. "But how do I know what will help?" The voice was soft. "When your mind forgets the self, every step becomes service." This is the heart of Samantabhadra, not just knowing what is good, but doing it, even when tired, even when no one sees, even when the benefit is invisible. Some bodhisattvas sit in meditation, others speak sutras. Samantabhadra cleans the floor, carries the sick, plants trees he will never see grow, because his practice is not abstract. It is bodily, it is effort, and it is choice. In the West, we often associate wisdom with silence, stillness, detachment. But Mahayana Buddhism offers a different view. That wisdom and action are not separate. That the awakened mind moves, not compulsively, but naturally, like water down a mountain. Samantabhadra teaches, if you bow, bow completely. If you eat, eat with gratitude. If you work, work with your whole body. If you vow, live the vow. A novice once asked a Zen master, "What is the most advanced form of practice?" The master pointed to the broom, then to the rice pot, then to the novice's own worn sandals. "Whatever needs doing," he said, "do it completely." In this way, Samantabhadra is not lofty. He is practical. He does not ask you to fly. He asks you to stay grounded and keep going, to help even one being, to smile even once for someone who is suffering, to remember that in a single action, sweeping, bowing, cooking, there can be immeasurable merit when done with a mind of service. There's a teaching. A bodhisattva never asks, "Will this be noticed?" A bodhisattva asks, "Does this help?" In modern life, we are busy. We're taught to measure action by its results, but Samantabhadra teaches boundless action, where the result is not yours to keep, where the act itself is enough, where planting a seed you'll never see flower is not foolish, it is sacred. Commentary. Samantabhadra is not a figure on a pedestal. He is a mirror. He shows us that enlightenment is not an escape from the world. It is a return to it, fully awake, with sleeves rolled, with hands open, with vows not recited but lived. The white elephant is not fast, but it is strong. It does not seek applause. It just walks, one foot after the other, one act after the next, and the bodhisattva upon it smiles. Because every breath is part of the vow. To follow Samantabhadra is not to be perfect. It is to be willing, to step forward, to show up, to fall down and vow again. Because the path is long, but every step walked in service becomes joy. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. The leaves whispered of him before his name ever reached a village gate. Parents clutched their children. Merchants rerouted their caravans. Monks bowed their heads, not in reverence, but in caution. For the man they called Angulimala roamed the forests like a curse in flesh. They said he wore a garland of severed fingers. They said he moved like wind through tall grass, too fast, too silent, too deadly. They said he had no soul, but the truth was more complicated. He had once been ahimsaka, a child born to a noble Brahmin family, gentle, studious, with a heart like spring water, clear, eager, pure. His name meant harmless, and for a time it fit. His parents glowed with pride. His teachers praised his mind. He recited texts with ease and never raised his voice. He walked the sacred path with reverence. But even gardens grow shadows, and in the heart of his teacher, a master once kind, jealousy stirred like embers beneath calm. What if this boy outshines me? What if he is remembered while I am forgotten? And so, the poison was planted. Whispers behind closed doors. Lies dropped like oil into water. The teacher turned the other students against ahimsaka. Then, turning to the boy himself, he spoke. If you truly wish to complete your training, bring me a gift. 1,000 lives, 1,000 fingers. Ahimsaka was horrified, but loyalty ran deep, and confusion deeper still. His world, once steady, spun sideways. The teachings twisted, the compass lost. And so he walked into the forest, heart trembling, mind clouded. At first, he resisted. Then, he rationalized. Then, he obeyed. One by one, lives fell. One by one, fingers were taken. He strung them on a garland around his neck, not out of pride, but as proof. A grotesque tally, a vow he could not break. Ahimsaka was gone. Only Angulimala remained. Years passed. Villages emptied at the sound of his approach. No warrior could stop him. No plea could reach him. He lived in the trees like a demon, fed by fear, haunted by silence. But sometimes, late at night, he would sit by the river and weep, not loudly, not dramatically, just a single, soundless shudder, as if his soul still remembered what it used to be. Then came the day everything changed. A new rumor reached the region. A monk in saffron robes was walking the land, barefoot and alone, unarmed, unafraid. His presence turned swords to dust. His gaze stilled storms. The Buddha. Angulimala laughed when he heard it. Let him come, he said. Let me take his finger too. And so he waited. It was mid-morning when the figure appeared, walking slowly along the forest path, robe brushing the grass, eyes lowered, bowl in hand. No fear, no hesitation. Angulimala stepped out from the trees, blade drawn. But the monk did not stop. Nor did he hurry, just walked. Calm, present, silent. Something in Angulimala snapped. With a roar he charged. The earth pounded beneath him. His breath came wild. His blade glinted in the sun. But no matter how fast he ran, the monk remained just ahead, neither speeding up nor slowing down, until suddenly he stopped and turned. Their eyes met. The forest held its breath. Angulimala's chest heaved. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop walking!" And the Buddha spoke, calm, clear, eternal. "I have already stopped, Angulimala. It is you who has not." The words hit harder than any weapon. Stopped? The monk had stopped? Angulimala blinked. "What do you mean?" "I have stopped chasing harm, stopped feeding the fires of anger, greed, and ignorance. But you still run." Angulimala lowered his sword. "Not all the way, just a little, but enough." What should I do?" And the Buddha stepped closer, unshaken, unarmed, unafraid. "Drop the weapon," he said, "and follow." For a long moment, Angulimala stood frozen. The forest was silent. Even the wind waited. Then, with trembling hands, the man removed the garland from his neck. Each finger clattered to the ground, like a lifetime falling apart. He dropped the sword and fell to his knees. "I don't know how to walk your path," he whispered. The Buddha extended a hand, not to lift, but to witness. "You already have," he said. The townspeople were outraged. When word spread that Angulimala, the killer, the terror, the demon of the forest, had become a monk, they rioted. They threw stones at him as he walked. They spat at his feet. They demanded his blood. But he did not strike back. He carried his bowl. He bowed when struck. He sat in silence and wept again, but not for himself. For them, one day after a particularly violent outburst from the crowd, he returned to the monastery bruised and bleeding. The Buddha looked at him, eyes deep as sky. "You endure much, Angulimala." Angulimala bowed his head. "I deserve it." "The past is a shadow," the Buddha said. "It follows you until you stop turning to chase it." One morning, he heard a woman crying in labor outside the village. The pain was great, the danger greater, but the people refused to help. "She's cursed," they whispered. "Her child will be born into blood." Angulimala stepped forward. "I will go." The villagers gasped. "You, the murderer, you'll curse her." But he walked past their fear and knelt beside the woman. His voice was soft. "By the truth I now live, by the harm I have abandoned. May you and your child be safe." And she was. The birth was clean, the child strong. From that day, the whispers began to change. Years later, the man once known as Angulimala became a teacher of peace. He lived quietly, he sat often, he spoke gently. Children no longer feared him. Old men bowed to him. Mothers called upon him for blessings. But he never forgot the garland, never forgot the sword. They were not trophies. They were reminders of how far a man can fall and how far a soul can rise. When his final day came, It was quiet. The monks gathered near. He sat upright, as always, in meditation. He did not cry, did not call out. He simply exhaled, one long, peaceful breath, and let go. And in that final stillness, the forest that once whispered his name in fear, now whispered something else, forgiveness. The young monk spoke with confidence. He had studied for years. He had memorized the sutras, debated the Dharma, written essays on emptiness and non-self. Now he stood before Master Obaku, hoping to impress him. "What is the ultimate truth of Buddhism?" he asked, bowing low. The question was polished, prepared, even reverent. But Obaku said nothing. Instead, he stepped forward and shouted, loud, sudden, like thunder cracking a still lake. The monk stumbled backward, heart racing. His thoughts vanished. His pride scattered like startled birds. And for a moment, just one brief, breathless moment, his mind stopped. No questions, no answers. Just space, raw and awake. That was the lesson. A shout. Not of anger, but of compassion. Not to belittle, but to break. To shatter the walls of thinking that separate seeker from truth. In the Zen tradition, this is known as katsu, a fierce cry. A single wordless eruption that pierces through the mind's constant noise. Obaku used it like a blade, not to wound, but to cut away illusion, to jolt the student out of the fog of thought. Because sometimes, you don't need more understanding. You need a wake-up call. Think of a dream. You're walking through it, believing it, responding to it. Then someone shouts your name. You jolt awake and realize none of it was real. Obaku's shout was like that, not a teaching, a waking. Years later, the monk returned. He bowed before Obaku and said, "I finally understand why you shouted." Obaku smiled and said, "Then forget that I ever did." Because even the memory of awakening can become another concept, another prison. Zen cuts not just through delusion, but through the attachment to insight itself. Obaku was a teacher of few words, but when he spoke or shouted, he struck deep. Once another student asked him, "What is the path to liberation?" Obaku raised his fist. The student said nothing, then bowed, because in that moment he understood. The path was this. Not words about liberation, but the raw, silent, direct presence of the fist before him. Western minds often recoil from this. We're trained to expect kindness to be soft, truth to be calm, teachers to be gentle. But in Zen, compassion doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it roars, because the cage of the thinking mind is strong, and it takes a powerful noise to break it. Obaku's shout was not personal, it was not performance. It was pure action, free from hesitation, free from agenda. A sound that came from no self, and landed in the heart like a bell. Another story is told. A monk was dozing off during meditation. Obaku walked behind him, raised his staff, and struck the ground beside him, hard. The monk jolted upright, eyes wide. The master said only, "If you sleep through life, you will dream of Zen, but never wake to it." The monk bowed. He never fell asleep in the hall again. These moments are not cruel. They are kindness without comfort. Because comfort can lull us into dreaming. But Zen is the practice of waking again and again until waking becomes your natural state, until presence is all you need. Imagine someone drowning in shallow water. You don't throw them a book about swimming. You pull them up, sometimes roughly, but always with love. That is Obaku's shout, a hand reaching through illusion, grabbing you by the robe and saying, "Wake up." Commentary. Not all teachings arrive gently. Some arrive like a storm, like cold water to the face, like a sound so loud it shakes the thoughts out of your spine. Because truth is not fragile. It doesn't need to be whispered. It just needs to be heard. And often the most compassionate thing a teacher can do is stop trying to explain and simply interrupt. Interrupt the story. Interrupt the me. Interrupt the years of polite ego dressed up as spirituality. Obaku knew this. He wasn't teaching Buddhism, he was teaching freedom. And sometimes freedom begins not with understanding, but with a single sharp, sacred shout. If you walk away from Zen with nothing but quotes, you've missed it. If you remember the stories but never felt the cut, you're still dreaming. But if something within you, some soft center you didn't know you had, felt this story not as words, but as thunder, then maybe, just maybe, you've begun to wake up. There was once a man who lived in poverty. His shoes were worn, his coat threadbare, his belly often empty, and his hands always calloused. But he had a friend, kind and wealthy, who loved him deeply. One day this friend came to visit. They shared a meal, laughed like children, and drank until the poor man fell asleep in contentment. Before leaving, the friend saw how hard the man's life had become. So he quietly took a jewel, a priceless, radiant stone, and stitched it inside the lining of the man's robe. He said nothing. He simply left the gift where it could not be lost. Years passed. The poor man wandered, worked, begged, slept beneath bridges and woke in alleyways. He remained convinced he had nothing, never knowing that a treasure was sewn into his own clothing. He suffered, all while wealth brushed against his ribs, all while forgetting what he already carried. Then one day the two friends met again, and when the rich man saw the state of his companion, he cried out, "Why have you lived this way? Don't you remember? I gave you everything. The jewel has been with you this whole time." The poor man froze. His hands trembled as he turned the robe inside out. And there, nestled in the seam, untouched and waiting, was the jewel. This is a parable from the Lotus Sutra, and it is not about wealth, it is about Buddha nature. It is about the truth we already carry, but forget. The man is all of us, wandering, doubting, working endlessly to find meaning, purpose, belonging, thinking we must earn it, thinking we must seek it, never realizing we were born with the jewel. We never lacked it, we only forgot to look. Buddha nature is not something to gain. It is not granted to the worthy, it is already here, in the one who chants, in the one who steals, in the one who weeps in shame, in the one who laughs too loudly in the back of the zendo. The jewel shines equally. It does not discriminate. In Mahayana Buddhism, this parable is a teaching of Tathagatagarbha, the womb of Buddhahood. It means that all beings, no matter how lost, carry the seed of awakening, not as potential, but as reality, already whole, already luminous, already stitched into the lining of our very being. The problem is not that we are broken. The problem is that we believe we are broken. And so we search outside, in teachers, in techniques, in titles, in temporary comforts, all while the jewel sits quietly inside, waiting. There's a saying in Zen, don't seek the truth, only stop cherishing opinions. Because the more we chase, the farther we run from what is already still. In the story, the friend does not blame. He simply says, look. That is the role of the teacher, not to give you the jewel, but to remind you it's there, to show you the thread, to help you turn your robe inside out. Even your flaws are not flaws. They are fabric. Even your pain is not proof of lack. It is the tension in the thread that protects the jewel. Even your delusion is a path, if you let it lead you inward. The poor man's mistake wasn't laziness. It was forgetting his inheritance, just like us. We forget we are enough. We forget we are worthy. We forget that what we seek has always been with us. Buddhism is not about becoming holy. It is about remembering who you are, who you've always been, what cannot be taken from you. Not by grief, not by failure, not by your own darkest thoughts. Sometimes people ask, but if I already have Buddha nature, why practice? And the answer is simple: to remember, to loosen the thread, to notice the glimmer, to stop walking past yourself like a stranger. Commentary: the jewel is not hard to find, but it is easy to overlook, because it does not shout. It does not sparkle in the usual light. It sits in the quietest part of you and waits for you to be still enough to feel it. You may not believe this yet. That's okay. Belief is not required. Only curiosity, only the courage to look inside the robe and ask, what if I am already whole? In a monastery garden, a novice once asked the teacher, where can I find the Buddha? The teacher pointed to the ground. Toes. Then to the novice's chest. Heart. Then to the novice's eyes. Everywhere you see, but especially where you never thought to look. You have the jewel. So now, stop asking how to earn it. Start asking how to honor it. Live from it. Speak from it. Let it shape your steps. And when others forget their own jewels, remind them gently, just like the friend did. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. A monk walked along a dusty trail, his robe fluttering slightly with each step. The morning air was clear, the sun warm but soft. A few birds called lazily from the treetops, but the monk's brow was furrowed. He had been sent to deliver a letter to a nearby monastery, and he was late. He had misread the schedule, taken the wrong turn, and now walked quickly, heart agitated beneath his robe. Each step struck the earth too hard. Each breath was shallow. His mind raced ahead. Will they think me careless? How could I have made such a mistake? I should have left earlier. What kind of monk forgets the path? Then he heard a voice behind him. Excuse me, Sir Monk. He turned to see a young boy, no older than 10, running up the path barefoot. He held something cupped in his palms. The monk paused. Yes? The boy stopped, panting, and held out his hands. Inside them sat a small, round pebble, no bigger than a thumbprint. It's beautiful, isn't it? The boy said. The monk looked down. It was smooth, flecked with tiny bits of crystal, glinting gently in the light. I found it near the stream, the boy said. It looked lonely. I thought maybe someone should notice. The monk smiled politely. That's kind of you. He began to turn away, but the boy looked up at him and said something that stopped him mid-step. Did you see any of the flowers you passed today? The monk blinked. What? The boy tilted his head. You've walked almost a mile. The path is full of little blue flowers, but your robe is dusty and your eyes are tight. You didn't see any of them, did you? The monk looked down at the pebble again. Then slowly, he sat on a flat rock at the side of the path. The boy grinned and plopped down beside him, offering the pebble again. And the monk, still holding the unopened letter, took it gently in his hand. This is the story of mindfulness in ordinary things. Commentary. In Zen, we often speak of awakening as though it is some great flash of light or a sudden shift in consciousness. But often, awakening is small, like noticing a flower you've walked past for weeks, or hearing the sound of your own breath after a hard day, or holding a pebble that simply is. The monk had been walking as if his destination were the only thing that mattered. His hurry had made him blind. Not because he lacked wisdom, but because he had left the present moment behind in favor of imagined shame and future apologies. The boy, with no training and no robe, was more awake than he, not because he had studied sutras, but because he saw what was in front of him, and he shared it. There's a Zen phrase: the miracle is not to walk on water, but to walk on the earth. The monk delivered the letter later that day, but he took a different path back, slower, softer. He paused to notice the flowers the boy had spoken of, tiny blossoms with indigo petals, scattered like spilled paint across the roadside. He bowed to them, then reached into his robe and touched the small pebble still in his sleeve. After that, he kept it on the windowsill beside his mat, not as a relic, but as a reminder that awareness begins not with enlightenment, but with noticing what's already here. We spend our lives waiting for bigger signs, bigger truths, more impressive moments. But the sacred is everywhere, in the weight of a spoon, the hush of dusk, the rhythm of footsteps, the coolness of a cup before tea is poured. The boy in the story grew up. He never became a monk, but he taught his children to pause, to touch the bark of trees, to look into puddles after rain, to name the colors of the sky at sunset. And his children did the same. Sometimes the greatest teachers do not stand at the front of a hall. They kneel by a stream and lift a stone, so let the pebble teach you. Let it slow you down. Let it whisper, this moment matters too. There was once a tree that stood just beyond the monastery walls, a tall maple. Its leaves flamed gold each autumn, spilling light into the courtyard like scattered coins. Monks often paused beneath it, bowing to its stillness, especially when the season turned. One afternoon in early autumn, a young novice sat beneath the tree troubled. His master had given him a koan to meditate on, What do you cling to that no longer lives? He had meditated, chanted, even fasted, but the answer would not come. That day, the wind had begun its long conversation with the branches. A single leaf, amber at the edges, twirled down, landed softly in the novice's lap. He stared at it. Fragile, veined, no longer green, still beautiful, but no longer living. The tree gave no sign of loss. No grief, no clinging, only release. Another leaf drifted down, then another. The novice looked up. The tree was letting go of what had once been its crowning glory. Not with sorrow, but with grace. Later, he spoke with his master. Why does the tree drop what once gave it life? The master replied, because it trusts the cycle. It knows spring will come again. It makes room by releasing. The novice thought of the things he had held too tightly, a grudge from a harsh word, a dream that had withered, an idea of who he should become. He returned to the tree the next day, sat beneath it again. This time, when a leaf fell into his hand, he whispered, "Thank you," and let it go. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Letting go is not loss, it is returning." As the days grew colder, the tree became bare. Some monks said it looked lonely, exposed, but the novice saw strength in that nakedness, a kind of quiet surrender. It was not clinging to what had passed. It was preparing for what would come. Winter arrived. Snow dusted the monastery roofs. The tree stood still, unmoving, uncovered, unconcerned. Months passed, and then, one morning in spring, the novice awoke to find tiny buds on the tree's limbs, software green, new. He smiled and understood at last. What we release returns, but only when we've stopped grasping. There is a phrase in Buddhist teaching, you can't receive with a closed hand. The tree had shown this truth. Letting go is not the end. It is the opening. In the heart of a wealthy city, wrapped in silk and stone, lived a man who had everything. Gold draped his halls. Ivory framed his mirrors. Incense curled in soft waves from brass burners that never cooled. His name was Viran. He owned land, warehouses, servants, even ships that crossed oceans bearing his name on their sails. And yet, he could not sleep. Each night, he turned beneath embroidered sheets, his mind counting coins like sheep. Each morning, he awoke with new orders, new demands, new acquisitions. He kept building, kept gathering, but inside there was a tightness he could not name. One day, as he stepped from his carriage, he noticed a beggar sitting beside the temple gate. The beggar's robe was faded and torn. His alms bowl was empty, but his eyes were calm, still as a pond before dawn. Viran glanced at him and scoffed. "If I had nothing," he said, "I would not smile." The beggar bowed. "If you truly had nothing," he said, "you might finally know peace." The words followed Viran like a shadow. He tried to forget them, tried to drown them in wine, in silk, in celebration. But they clung like a thread caught in the lining of his soul. The next morning, he returned to the temple. The beggar was still there, eyes closed, back straight. breath soft. "How do you do this?" Viren asked. "You have no food, no roof, no gold, and yet you sit like you own the world." The beggar opened his eyes. "I do not own the world," he said, "but the world no longer owns me." Viren stared. Something inside him cracked. That day he left behind his ring. The next, his jeweled belt. Then quietly, he began walking to the temple each morning, leaving behind one possession at a time. No ceremony, no announcement, just letting go, piece by piece. The beggar never asked, never praised. He simply shared his seat on the stone step. Weeks passed. One morning, Viren arrived barefoot. No rings, no silks, no guards, only his breath and the ache in his knees. He sat beside the beggar, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt nothing pulling at him. No hunger for more, no fear of losing, no need to be seen, just stillness. He opened his eyes. "Have I become poor?" he asked. The beggar smiled. "No," he said softly. "You've become free." This is the story of true wealth, the kind that doesn't glitter, but glows from within. Commentary: wealth is not evil, it is neutral. Like a knife, it can feed or wound. Like fire, it can warm or consume. The Buddha taught that attachment, not possession, is the root of suffering. You can have little and still cling. You can have much and still be free. The beggar was not rich in gold, but he had space. He had his breath, his presence, his peace. He was not owned by anything, not even his own suffering. The parable reminds us, you are not your bank balance, not your reputation, not your wardrobe or your followers. You are the one who notices, the one who breathes, the one who can let go. Letting go is not about loss. It is about choice. When you no longer need a thing to feel complete, you are free to enjoy it or leave it without fear. That is the highest wealth. There's a Zen proverb, "When I had nothing, I had everything." It does not mean destitution. It means this: when your hands are not full of fear and control, they are finally open to life. So whether you own much or little, ask yourself, do these things serve me? Or do I serve them? If they crumble, do I crumble too? Or am I the same presence, the same breath, the same open sky? Regardless, true wealth is not counted. It is felt. It is the spaciousness of a mind that can sit still beside a bowl, empty or full, and smile just the same. Be that kind of rich. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.